Everyone. I am Diane Alves. I'm the Executive Director at the Clackamas County Arts Alliance, and we are the fiscal agent for the Clackamas County Cultural Coalition. The video we're doing shortly will help you work through all your questions you may have when you get ready to apply this year for a grant. I want to introduce you to my colleague today, Lisa Brown. Lisa, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lisa Brown. I work with the Clackamas County Arts Alliance and many other organizations to help them successfully prepare grants, and I've been doing that for a very long time. So look forward to sharing some guidance today that may help you in your grant writing process. So we dive in?
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. Everyone, what Lisa's going to share shortly here on the screen is what you'll see when you enter the Clackamas County Cultural Coalition's website. And we're going to walk you through some criteria and just get started.
All right, let me share this screen. Can you see that? There we go.
There you go.
Alrighty. So this is directly from the Clackamas County Cultural Coalition's website, so you can find it there as well. But I pulled out the things that I thought would be most relevant and for us to easily walk through today. So first of all, this application is for the 2026 Project and General Operating Grant cycle. And the application opens September 29th. So hopefully by the time you're viewing this, you've already accessed that. The key date to keep in mind, of course, is that the application deadline is November 3rd. That date will get here sooner than you think. So don't wait till November 1st to start your application. Now, this application is specifically for projects or operational support occurring between January 26, basically January 1, 2026, and December 30th, 2026. So anything that you're applying for has to fall within that range, not outside of that range. And the grant awards will range from $751 to $3,000. So as you're considering what you're going to ask for, keep in mind that there is a limit to the maximum amount that you can ask for. I would encourage you, and this is on their website, to please read the cultural plan for arts, heritage, and humanities. It's really going to help you understand how to make your application competitive. It's going to make sure that you align with their funding priorities, and it's going to let them know that you've done the work necessary to apply for this grant in a meaningful way. Just scroll down here. Um, you will be asked to submit this in a submittable application platform, submittable being the platform. So you want to check that out in advance. Don't wait till the last minute in case there's any technical difficulty. You'll need to create a username and a password. There's no cost to do this. And if you've applied through Submittable before, of course, you should still have your login information. I imagine that there's an opportunity for that to be resent to you if you've forgotten it because it's been a while. I want to touch on quickly who's eligible to apply. Um, this is important to keep in mind as you're considering your project. Those who are eligible to apply are organizations that are physically located in Clackamas County and with a Clackamas County mailing address. So though you might be doing a project, but you're located in Hillsborough or Portland, you must be located in Clackamas County. And then the project itself must clearly benefit Clackamas County residents. So keep those two things in mind. You must be based here, and the project must be serving people who live here in Clackamas County. And again, go back and look at those criteria and make sure that all the other pieces line up. But those are the two big things to keep in mind. And you may find, well, this isn't the right project for me because although I do serve Clackamas County, my mailing address is not here. And there's no soft spot there. It's either you are here or you're not. So just keep that in mind. Qualifying projects can be many things. I think one of the things I want to call out is you can read this long list on their website, but the projects must result in measurable outcomes within at least one funding priority. So you may have a great idea and it may have a lot of potential impact, but if it does not align with one of the funding priorities of this grantor and can't be proven through some kind of measurable outcome, whether that's the number of people who participated or what you presented, there needs to be something there that you can connect the dots between what you're doing and what if one or more funding priorities even. So again, assess that before you begin to make sure that you're going to be competitive for this grant, because you don't want to waste a lot of time if in fact you aren't properly aligned. There are a number of other things here, each one of them very important, but read through that list carefully. I will say that if you've had a grant in the past, you must be in good standing and have all your prior final reports completed, because if you have not, then you are automatically disqualified from applying. Um, the project must be completed within the calendar year applied for, so that January 1, December 30 timeframe is what you'll aim for. It can't happen in early 2027, and it can't start before January 1 of 2026. And then keep this in mind too, because we often think that once the grant project is finished, the grant is complete. And in fact, it is not. Final reports need to be submitted within 30 days of the project completion. So whatever date is on your timeline that says my project is done June 30th, you must then have a project report to them within 30 days after that date. And this is important, because if you don't do that, you're out of compliance with your grant agreement, and it's going to inhibit your ability to apply for future grants. So do take those reporting requirements seriously and mark them on your calendar as you're working out your timeline. Mark your reporting timeline as well. Who are you going to gather information from? Is that going to take a certain amount of time to do? What are your tracking mechanisms? Things like that. So I always like to call out the reports a bit, because they are often overlooked, and when folks get there, they're not sure what they really need to provide. It needs to be measurable, and it should demonstrate impact. And I imagine that there are opportunities to include attachments to that show what you accomplished. There are a few restrictions, pretty basic, but if you haven't turned in your last project report, you would not be qualified to apply this time. Um, Endowments aren't, I don't imagine anybody's doing these things, but one to keep in mind is hospitality. Alcohol or food beverage related expenses are not eligible. Some of these things may be events. These grant funds cannot be applied towards those types of things. There's an FAQ that you can link to here, as you'll see in red. That's going to answer probably more questions than even this has pointed out. And then if all else fails, you've looked at the FAQ, you've watched the video, and you still have some concerns or questions, that's when it's time to contact the Clackamas County Arts Alliance, and they'll do their best to help you. They're working under the guidance of the Cultural Coalition. So whatever rules and standards the Cultural Coalition has established, those are the ones that the Arts Alliance is going to encourage you, well, emphasize that you abide by, because there's no flexibility in those rules and standards. To be fair for everyone, has to be consistent, and the Cultural Coalition um, has put a lot of time and work into this, and the Arts Alliance supports that fully, and should be able to answer your questions. Diane, where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, why don't you stop sharing and I will share the actual application. Once you go into Submittable, once you're signed into Submittable, you will come up on this page, which I'm going to share right now, the applicant information. And this is where you'll start to enter in all the information for the grant. So I'll go
Great.
ahead and scroll, Lisa, and you can just walk people through.
Okay. Well, it starts out with pretty basic stuff, is your organization name. Now, keep in mind that this should be your legal name. If you want to put in parentheses a DBA or doing business as, that's important. Sometimes I know when folks establish their 501c3 a long time ago and then they modify their name, um, what the grantor needs to still see is your legal name. So just keep that in mind. You've got character limits or word limits in all of these sections, and so keep those in mind as well. It won't accept any content past those characters. First of all, I recommend start this in a Word document that you can work on independently, do your word counts, do your character counts, and make all of your edits as you have people review this and what have you. Create your content in a Word document, and then you can cut and paste into the submittable document. It goes a lot faster, and you're much less likely to make errors if you are preparing in advance rather than trying to do it in the application in the portal, because inevitably those things don't catch the things that a Word document would, such as typos or other things that you might not see. Um, And then, of course,
One thing I
who are
might point
you?
out, Lisa,
Mhm.
is that you can, as people are filling this out, you can save it as you go along as a draft, and only when you're completely done and you feel like you've done everything correct, then you can submit it. So they can, log in, enter things, download some stuff, go see what's on the application, go get some more information, come back, and do that several times if they need to, and then go ahead and only at the very end when you're ready to submit, hit submit. So.
That's great. It's good to know that. And one of the things I often ask clients I work with, I'll write everything out in a Word document or whatever I'm using, upload the content, review it again myself, and then I'll ask someone else, in this case it would be my client, let's have you review this and make sure that everything makes sense to you. So you might have somebody in your organization or on your board, or if somebody else is preparing the grant content, of course, then your executive director or the person who's the final sign off on this, have them take a look, make sure it all makes sense. It is great that you can save it because that means you can go back and fix it. But once you've submitted it, it's done forever. So just, take your time and read through everything carefully and then read it again because it's funny how often you may forget some small little detail. I believe the system will tell you if you've missed something, but don't take any chances because the grantor will see it on the other end for sure. Excuse me. So, who are you? You are either a nonprofit organization or you're an individual who is a co-applicant with an organization. Um, and then who is the primary contact person at that organization? If you're an individual applying, Diane, tell me this, should that then be the individual at that partnering organization or would it be the artist themselves?
Contact person will be the person that is actually applying. So if this happened to be an individual artist working with another nonprofit organization, they would be the contact person.
Okay,
And then just as we get down a little farther, there's a co-applicant, and that's where then the organization you're working with would apply. If you
great.
are applying on your own, just nonprofit organization, you fill out just this top part and not do the co-applicant part.
Great. So whomever is going to be in charge of this project and could answer questions if the Cultural Coalition has some during the review process is somebody who's authorized and qualified to answer any questions about the proposal itself and perhaps more about your organization. The title of that person, whether it's an executive director or your board chair, whomever that may be, make sure you're letting folks who know who that is. Um, and then if you get down to your address, what is your mailing address? Sometimes mailing addresses are different than your physical address. We want to make sure you have the right mailing address because they're going to ask for your physical address. But the mailing address assures that anything that needs to be sent by mail actually gets to you, particularly if that physical address is not one where you receive mail. So that's important to keep in mind. You've got a contact number, and as you'll see in the red, those are required fields. You have to fill those out. You may choose to fill out the other ones. For example, you put your organization contact phone number down, but you don't have someone answering that phone, throughout the day, then the best cell phone number, and in this case would be the contact person, might want to add their cell phone number so that if the grantor has a question, they don't get hung up waiting for you to listen to the messages back at the office and finally get back to them. Similarly, the organization's contact email would best be the person who is the contact person for this. And then we've got, if you have a co-applicant, some of their information as well. So co-applicant's name and their email, their mailing address, and their cell phone number. Because if you're collaborating with a co-applicant, the selection panel may have questions for them, and so you need to be able to provide that. Um, if you have a website, be sure to include that. That's a great way for grantors to become familiar with your work and see some of the things you've done in the past so that they can say to themselves, wow, this is an organization that is viable, it is doing good work, and is something that we would like to be associated with or learn more about. And then, of course, the year that your organization is founded. And I know sometimes that gets lost in the cobwebs of history, but if you have a 501c3, look at that letter. Hopefully, you've written other grants. You can pull that out of there. But we do need to know that that's a required field. And then, of course, the type of organization you are. Mostly, you're going to be probably clicking 501c3 nonprofit, but there may be a few other projects that qualify for this particular grant cycle that might fall within those other categories. If you select other, you do need to be prepared to tell us what you are, because other is not meant to be just an empty void. And then you start out with a lot of your content, and you'll notice again that there is here a limit of 250 words. So as you are working in your other document where it's more easy to um, calculate those things, you can check. Now, the organization's mission statement probably isn't 250 words, but they've given you plenty of space here to fill it out. The next section is to describe 2 or 3 highlights or accomplishments in your organization's history. If you have highlights that are relevant to, if you're doing a program or project application, if you have other examples of something you've done similarly that you've been successful with in the past, or things you've done to grow as an organization, if you're looking for operating support, what are some of the things that you've accomplished in your history that you feel particularly proud of, and that also demonstrate who you are as an organization and show the grantor that you achieve impact and results in your work. So make it impactful. A nice, happy story is great, but if it can demonstrate who you are and what you do, that's really important. So keep that in mind. What would the grantor want to know? They want to know that you have accomplished things that can be tangibly retold. So keep that in mind. If this is your first time applying, then you would click no. If it is yes, a drop-down box will come down and you'll be asked to lay out the prior grant time frame and projects that you've gotten in the past. There'll be another little narrative box. So go back and double check if you've gotten grants in the past, and make sure that you can outline those for the Cultural Coalition so they can see if they have a history with you or not. Having a history doesn't deter you from getting funding, and not having history doesn't either. It's just helpful for them to know, because they may want to look back in their own records, make sure you've completed your reports and things like that. So, and then which grant are you applying for? There are 2 ways you can apply with this particular grant cycle. Project support. So that is a piece of work that you're planning to do that is part of your organization, but isn't necessarily representative of everything you do. So you might be doing a festival or having some workshops, things that fall within the purview of your mission, but don't totally represent all of your work. And then, of course, general operating support is just core support for the work that you do throughout the year, to support, again, those things that align with the Cultural Coalition's objectives and priorities. Again, the total amount that you're going to request is somewhere between 751. Don't ask for 750 for some reason, but and 3,000, not 3,001. It's got to be within that range. And then if you are asking for general operating support, that's what you would put in as your project title. And if you're doing a project, then of course you're going to have some kind of name for that project that gives it an identifier that that both you and the funder can relate back to. And then you have 500 words, which is a pretty nice little bit of territory to do your project or general summary of your organization. If you're doing operating support, then you're going to want to give a summary of the various things that you do and the impact that you have in the community in a very concise, clear, and direct way. It's easy to kind of get hung up on in the sort of details of it all, but think big picture. What would it be most helpful for a funder to know about you? And what is it that clearly demonstrates what you do and why you do it? If it's a project, again, be clear about your objectives and what you are going to try to accomplish with grant funding. The start dates, as we mentioned earlier, can be no earlier than January 1 of 2026 and no later than December 31 of 2026, which isn't to say if you're doing something in the holidays and it's not happening until December 1st, but it ends by December 31st, you can still apply. It doesn't have to happen that early in the year. It just has to fit within those windows. And then you've got some cultural funding priorities that you can select from, and you must select at least one. As you'll see, it's required. And you can look through that list. Again, you should already be prepared with this because you've read through the various documents that have been recommended for you. And then you'll know already when you come into this what you're hoping to accomplish in alignment with the Cultural Coalition. And then how does this grant advance any of the coalition's indicators of success? That's where you again have to do your homework, because if you don't know what those are, you can't necessarily tell anyone how you advance that. So be sure that you've gone back and looked at those indicators of success and said, my project or my organization is meeting this measure of success as outlined by the coalition, and therefore this is how we're advancing those indicators. That's how we're advancing their success. And then you've got the narrative section of your project or your operation for the year. So you're starting off with the need, problem, or gap. And this is important because this is the why of what you're doing. It's easy to say what you're doing sometimes, but we don't always know why we're doing it. So if your community has said, we would like to see this particular cultural activity, or you've identified a gap that, there's lack of opportunity for certain populations or youth or elders. If you see that you're meeting a need that someone else used to fill and no longer does, that might be that you're stepping up to fill that. So really understand what it is, that the why of what you're doing, because that sets up the sort of the rest of the premise. And if you're an organization, you're filling a particular need. Okay, what is that need? Why do you exist? And if it's a project, why are you doing this project? Not just because it's fun to do, but because there's a real reason and purpose that it is providing. And then you're going to tell how the grant will meet that need or problem. Again, you get a pretty generous word count here in 500 words. And so this should include your goals and activities. So it's not just what you're doing, but really how you're going to do it, what you plan, what you strategically plan to achieve. Getting the project done is a goal, but there's more to it than that. So think strategically about your goals. You want to increase the number of opportunities for population, or you want to bring a certain number of people into an event. Think about the goals and why. And again, always back to the why. And then the activities that you will undertake to achieve that. If it's in your operating, if you're doing operating, that's going to be the activities that you undertake throughout the year as an organization. If it's for a project, it's going to be a little more specific, and you will have, again, as part of your why, is we have a goal here we want to achieve. The reason why you've already stated, and here's what that goal is and how you're going to get that goal, how you're going to meet that goal. And when will your project happen? So we've already determined the time frame in which it must happen, but now we want to see a timeline. And this is important. An example is provided for you because the timeline isn't just say when the project happens, it's all the time leading up to it, the planning, the preparation, the outreach, the various things that you need to do to be successful in your project. If it's operating, then you're going to talk about the things that you're going to do throughout the year that that you can identify that funding is going to help support. And make sure that even with project, well, with everything, add your report deadline to the end of that timeline. That'll help you remember, and it will let them know that you have taken that into consideration in your planning. How many people do you estimate will benefit from this project or general operating support? So this is not for the history of your organization. This is for this point in time. So from January 1 to December 31, how many people will benefit if this is for general operating support? It's the people you come in contact with throughout the year, whomever else you're working with throughout that year. If it's a project, how many people came through the gates? How many people participated in your series of workshops? So you want to have tracking mechanisms. That's important. You can estimate this based on your past history or your best educated guess. Be realistic, because you remember you're going to have to report on this. And this is where people get hung up sometimes, is they will put a number out there that sounds great and will get them a grant, and then they fall so far short, it doesn't serve you well with the funder for future funding opportunities. So be realistic. If anything, be a little bit conservative, because it's always great to have exceeded those numbers too. But I would say make your best realistic guess. And if you have a history of doing an event, or if you have tracked your operational impact over the years, use that as your guidepost. We did this pre-COVID, and this is how many people came to this event. We haven't done it since, so we're not quite sure. Well, let's be a little conservative. Or we've seen consistently in doing this event over the last several years that we attract this many people, or in this thing that we're providing for the community, X number of people participate. And this is why it is so important to track those things, because it does come into play as you look at what is your impact on the community. And we hate to make it a numerical impact, but it's just part of a process of understanding where the highest impact can be had, or most, most meaningful. It doesn't always have to be the highest number, but it should be meaningful. Um, and then if you have a specific population, you can describe that population here. Again, this is required. It might be that we want to attract anyone in Clackamas County who's interested in a particular thing, or this is open to the general public, or this is serving children ages 5 through 8. Whatever that may be, define that population there. If this is meant for folks who have limited incomes and you're doing something that is reducing their barriers to participation, identify your population. You've got, again, 250 words here, but know who you're planning to bring into your project, or know who you focus on as an organization, and you should be able to articulate that there. And then partners too. Most of us in the nonprofit world work with partners, whether it's in our daily operations and the delivery of our mission, or if it's with a project. List in a and make this a bulleted list. You don't have to have a big narrative, but just list those partners. And these are folks that might work with you to undertake the work. It might be partners that supply access to the population you want to serve. This could be partners who,
Lisa,
yeah,
Lisa, I'm going to totally interrupt you here because
that's
this
okay.
is a really specific space that the
Ah,
Cultural Coalition Board feels strongly about. Partners listed here should only be the partners that you
thank you.
have an MOU or a signed working agreement with. So it's not necessarily just community partners or a vendor you might do a project with,
Forgot that
but
part.
it's someone who's actually joining with you to make sure this is a success, and you have some signed formal agreement or understanding, because later you're going to be asked to attach that agreement. And so if you work with other people in the community, that's great. We encourage you to do that. But this space is really only for those you have a formal agreement with for the project you're applying for.
Okay. Excuse me. Sorry. I knew I was going to
That's all
somehow
right.
not remember that.
That's all right.
Yeah. Oh, it
That's
says
all
it
right.
right there too. So I'm sorry. I can very tiny
Good.
print. Yes. And so an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. You're going to be doing this. Your partners are going to be doing that. We both signed off on agreeing to that. And just because it's a nice idea and you've talked to some folks about maybe doing it, that is not a partnership. That's a possibility, and possibilities don't get funded, but partnerships may. So yes, thanks for pointing that out.
That's all right.
You'll want to be sure that whatever you are providing with this application, and you'll be required to attach it later, is signed off by both sides, not you and not just them, both sides. And then how will you measure the success of your project or your operations for the year, your advancement towards your mission? So think about that again. What are you tracking? What does success look like? It doesn't have to just be numbers. You may seek anecdotal feedback that lets you know that the thing you did had a meaningful impact on people's lives in a certain way. Surveys are great, a great way to gather impact information. And of course, tracking data, whether even if that's in a spreadsheet or on a tally board or whatever it is. Think about the things that you will measure to prove that you had some success. If you fall short of your goals and it was less successful than you thought it would be down the road in your reporting, you can explain that. So don't be worried about what you hope to do is what you would put into that. And then later you'd have a chance to explain that if you don't quite match that. But do again, things you can measure, things you can track, things you can gather. I work with a lot of organizations who have a lot of goals, but they haven't figured out how they're going to track that and prove that they've actually accomplished that. So you keep it simple, but make sure that it's meaningful. And then the budget we're going to talk about at the end, they have a very specific budget format that you must use. So there is a link where you can download that, fill it in, it tallies everything for you, you save it, and then you will choose to upload that in the application portal itself. And then you've got what is your total project budget, which you're going to be pulling from that document. And your total project budget might far exceed, or at least exceed to some degree, the amount you're asking for. In fact, it should, because these grants aren't meant to fund 100% of any project. So if your total project budget is $3,000, then asking for $3,000 wouldn't be appropriate. You might ask for $1,500. If your project is $7,500, asking for $3,000 might be okay. But again, you've got to demonstrate where you're going to be using the money, and that sort of tells you exactly how much you should be asking for from the Cultural Coalition. And then you're going to be able to talk about that. You're going to say what those expenses are that would be specifically funded by your Cultural Coalition award. So as you do your budgeting and you're thinking about, well, we've got some staff time and we've got supplies, we've got promotion. Think of the things that really are the things you couldn't do unless you had this funding. So it could be the promotions, it could be the supplies, it could be um, the space that you need to rent. Think about where the Cultural Coalition's dollars can be applied and you can then express them here. And then this is always a hard one to answer. How will you be able to accomplish your plans if you're not fully funded? None of us want to not be fully funded, but it is a fact of life. So there are different ways to approach this. One answer might be if it's not fully funded, we can't do the project. That's not ideal, but it's be honest. However, you may say we're going to scale it back. Instead of doing 3 workshops, we'll do 1 workshop or whatever makes sense based on your project and the scalability of it. Or we're going to have one presenter that we're going to give a stipend to versus 3, whatever that is. Something that you can say, we can still achieve what our goal is. So important to, again, have that goal in mind, even if we do it on a smaller scale. If it truly means you cannot do it, be honest, because if you've applied and they say, well, we're going to fund you, and then you don't do it, that doesn't serve anybody well. And then there are some things here that are standard attachments. First being your last fiscal year profit and loss statement or budget in a PDF. So be sure that. And the last fiscal year being whenever your last fiscal year ended. If you're in the middle of a fiscal year that is January 1 to December 31st, then it'd be for 2024. If you're in the middle of a fiscal year that is split between, runs from July through June, you would go back to fiscal year 24 because we're in fiscal year 25. So
Right.
anyway, that's always confusing. And then, yeah, you're going to upload those for last fiscal year and then your year to date, same documents where you are in your current year. And that's going to let folks know if you've got what you've planned and then where you are against that plan, if you're in good shape financially or if you're really lagging or overspending, that stuff's going to show up there. And that may raise some questions. But again, just provide your profit and loss statement or budget with where you're at to date so that the funder has a sense of where you are in your fiscal year and what your financial health kind of looks like. There are a variety of supplemental materials that you can include, and you can upload up to 5. And it gives you a little bit more instruction there about the specifics of that. No more than 10 total pages within those 5 documents. Is that right, Diane?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Okay.
And the one thing, this is where you'll attach, if you are in a formal partnership with an organization, this is where you'll attach their letter of support and your MOUs and anything that goes along with that partnership. This will be
Mhm.
the space to do that.
And the letter of support is slightly different than your memorandum of understanding, the MOU, in that is your partner expressing the value of this project in a letter form. So that is in addition to that MOU. Having a letter of support from that partner just strengthens that partnership and lets the funder know that this is an agreed upon activity and that the partner themselves understands how it's beneficial either to the community or to certain populations. So it doesn't have to be long and you can help them craft that language if needed, but it is a way of letting the partner share their enthusiasm for your project, which is important. You've got as the partnership agreements and other things there, PDF onlys. If you are buying equipment or there are bids for services, you can include that. And sometimes that may be the contractor or vendor you're working with providing you with a bid, and then you just make sure you save that as a PDF and you can upload it. Bios and resumes, if you're working with a particular artist or you're engaging a presenter, it's great to have those to share because again, that sort of shows the where you are in the planning of your project. That, oh, well, we've got these relationships, we've got these folks lined up. That's great. And it also shows the quality of your project based on who you're inviting. And then anything else that might explain your project or what you do for your as an organization. That could be an organizational brochure or a flyer for your project, your activity, your event, anything that has another representation of what you do. One example might be if you did a similar project in a prior year, you could share a flyer from a past year. Again, that shows we've done this before and we know we're planning to do it again. And here's what it really looks like on paper. So that's a nice thing. And if you've got any sort of video link, that's always great too. And those are easy things to plug in, and it can give folks a real sense of what you have in mind or what you've done in the past. And then again, you've got those letters of support. This is where you would attach those. And then you get to the end and you check the box that you acknowledge that the information provided is accurate to the best of your knowledge. A grant is a point in time document that, while based in fact and plan, may be variable when the actual activities take place. So this is based on your honest assessment of what's going to happen and what you expect to be able to report back to the funder. We know that things happen and circumstances change, but in this moment, you are can say with integrity and honesty that this is what we're doing, and a funder will take that seriously. So please do that. And then, of course, the organization president, executive director, whomever is authorized to submit this, their name needs to go on this before you send it in. And as Diane noted, that you can save this draft, go back to it anytime you want, keep that login information somewhere where you can find it. And then once you're fully ready and you've reviewed it in the form, you've taken it, you've copied and pasted it, you've reviewed it, you've had somebody else look at it just to make sure you've crossed all your I's and dotted all your T's. And then you can submit that form. It may give you an option to then download the final version. I'm not sure, but in any event, you'll have your draft copy. So yeah, it's a bit of a process, but if you take the time to go through it carefully and thought and with some forethought, kind of harkening back to that first document, is really, if you've thought it through before you apply, then you should be good to go. If you're making it up in the moment, it always makes it a little harder. Doesn't mean it can't be done. Now I think we're going to switch to the budget. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep,
So
this is
this,
the budget template.
okay, this is the budget template. This is what you must use. Nothing else will be qualified. So it's a pretty basic format, but it makes sure that everyone is consistent. And for folks who aren't as familiar with budgets, it's kind of a way to help you learn how to do that. So obviously the name of your organization, the project date range. So when is your project beginning? When is it ending? Or if it's an operating grant, when does your year begin? When does it end? That's what needs to go in there. And then you've got your revenue side. And these are the things that are going to help pay for whatever it is you're doing, whether it's your operations for the year or it's your project. With revenue, of course, when we set out, we determine what we believe we can bring in to accomplish whatever we set out to accomplish. That may change as you get to the point of making your final report, but this is your best reasonable estimation of what you're going to bring in different areas of income. Donations and contributions are things that folks from the community would give you cash. Grants, this is what you're doing today. You might be writing a few other grants along the way. Estimate those that you think you could reasonably see success with. You might write $100,000 worth of grants and you may get zero. So you need to, again, be estimating what you believe based on your past history or your conversations with a funder, which are important to have, that you can then estimate what you think you might bring in grants. Earned revenue would be anything you're charging folks to participate. I'm coming to a workshop and you're going to charge me a fee, or you have members through memberships. That's part of your operating model. You've got admissions to an event. Sponsorships might be, oh, Diane's filling it in. And you can see it's tallying there at the bottom. So you don't have to do the math. You just have to have the right numbers. Sponsorships might maybe a local business is helping you by giving you $500 to help with this event. So you want to clean, or $200 or $2, whatever that might be. So don't forget to ask your local businesses for help, because that's a big piece of this, what we call diversified funding model. You can't really put all your eggs in any singular basket, especially not these days. Maybe you have some cash that you have set aside and that can go into the that you've planned to put into this project. So you've had some set aside funds that you could put in there as applicant cash. And then there might be other forms of revenue that you have. Maybe somebody's gifted something in particular that has a cash value. Um, and then the bottom line there is you're going to put in what you're requesting from the Cultural Coalition for this grant cycle, and then that would tally your total revenue for this project. And as you'll see here, this says $4,200, and you can't ask for more than 3,000. So you've got other forms of revenue, and you should. I don't think there's a grant funder out there that ever will, unless they're a very small family foundation or something that you have a personal relationship. Most of the time, they're going to fund a portion of your project, never the full thing, not just a portion of your operations figure, not the full thing. So this demonstrates that you would have to have other kinds of funding to complete your project. In kind is important. If there are things that you have to buy, so in other words, would hit your budget as an expense, but you're getting them donated, somebody's donating the cost of renting the venue or the materials that you need that you would typically have to pay for, you can count those as a donation. Or services, somebody's doing a workshop and not charging you, but you are typically paying folks a stipend. This person has declined the stipend. You can consider that a donated service, in-kind donation of services. And then you get to your expenses. And that is everything that's going to cost to do what you do. If it's operating, and of course, you're going to have a variety of things. You may have other, as you'll see here, there are other project expenses. That could be other operating expenses too. You can consolidate, if, as many folks do, will have a line item budget that is quite complicated and detailed. Try to consolidate that into some categories that can easily demonstrate sort of what the general purpose is. For projects, that's a little bit easier. Staff time is something to consider. Just because the project costs you in hard costs a certain number of dollars, if you have staff time that's being put into that, that counts too. That might not be funded by the grant if that's how you choose to go, but it does count as a cost towards your total budget. So if somebody's putting in 3 hours to develop the curriculum, or is going to spend 8 hours setting up an event, whatever that might be, or if you're the executive director and you're working with a committee and the committee time that you spend, anything like that, that's your time. Contracted services would be anyone you're bringing in, whether it's a presenter or an artist, which in this case often is the case, someone that you are paying to provide a service and you're actually paying them. It's not the in-kind side. It's the paid side. It could be a workshop presenter. It could be an artist. It could be a teacher, any number of a performer. So anything like that. Materials and supplies, that's fairly broad, but again, think about what it is specific to this project. If it's an operating grant, then of course it's for the year. If you're utilizing space where there is a fee or rent, then you include that there. And often activities are taking place outside of our own venues, then we want to make sure we're covering the rental cost. Marketing promotion, that's pretty cut and dried. And other project expenses, you might come up with costumes or other material, print stuff that isn't maybe fit into there, or design work, anything that, again, specific to this project that is a hard cost that you would be paying for, goes into that list. And then you get to the bottom and you realize that you're not quite to zero. And in this case, and in most cases in a grant, you're going to need to figure out how you balance that, because as this application says, you must equal zero to be balanced. So you go back and you either look at your expenses and see what you can reduce, or you go up to your revenue and you think, well, maybe we underestimated, or I can think of somebody that I can get that additional money from, and that'll allow us to achieve zero budget. So don't make it up, because again, you're going to report on all this. So give it your best guess, be realistic. Don't overestimate what you're going to raise. Don't underestimate what you're going to spend, because when you report it at the end of the day and there's a gap, the reviewers of the report are going to say, well, why was your budget so out of whack? So, come in with your best estimate. Again, this is all about being transparent, sticking by your commitment to integrity in the work that you're doing, because you're being entrusted with grant funds, and that trust is earned, and you earn it by doing based on your best information and your best intention, putting forward your honest stuff that can be evaluated and questioned, and you have a good answer for. Because if you get to the end of the day and say, why is there such a gap, and you say, I don't know, like, unlikely you'll get funded in the future. So budget's super important. I know it can be intimidating to folks, but just take your time. If you have somebody in your organization that understands numbers and budgets and spreadsheets and all that, better ask for their help. There's no harm in that. Bottom line is just be accurate, as honest as you can be, and transparent as you can be, and make sure that that bottom line equals zero when you net it out. Is there anything more to add on the budget side?
I would just say that when you download this during the application, go ahead and make a copy of it, fill it out. It will auto populate. Once you're done filling it out, go ahead and save it. And then you save it as a PDF. I think it comes to you as a Excel document or some kind of data
Probably.
document, depending on what you're working on. Save it as a PDF, and then go when you're in the application. There's a space to upload it back into that space. So you'll go back into Submittable and upload it there. And it should be pretty straightforward because you've just uploaded all those other PDF forms that were asked for during the time when you were filling it out. But no, I think that's everything about the budget.
Great. Well, I think just to sort of summarize everything, the key is to be prepared. Go back and look at the Cultural Coalition's website, read those documents that they request of you, not just suggest, but request of you to review to make sure that your project is lining up with their goals and intentions, and that you can clearly articulate how that alignment exists, that you can connect those dots, and then work through that application, read through it a few times, because what often happens is you'll start to answer a question, you realize that question gets asked elsewhere. So give yourself the time to read through it, become familiar with what's required so that you can eliminate redundancy or going to or having to go back and cut and paste and move something out of one place or another. Get familiar with that application. That's can be some of the best time spent. And then making sure you're involving others in the review process and even the planning process. If this is a project, make sure you've all got your head in the, in this project together and you have a conversation about this grant and how what it's going to help you do specifically, because that's what the Cultural Coalition wants to know. How will their funds specifically help you achieve your goal, your mission, and that they will then see impact at the end of that time. And then again, review before you submit to make sure that everything is accurate. This is a very competitive time for grants, and the volume of organizations applying for grants is higher than it's ever been. And so while we've always taken it seriously, it can't be emphasized enough that any small thing could get you disqualified. So you just want to make sure that you are reading those instructions, making sure that you're meeting the qualifications, expectations, requirements so that you come out at the end of this with some funding that will allow your project or your organization to accomplish its goals for the year. Is there anything else to add?
No, that's it. We wish you all the best. And again, if you get really stuck on something or if you have a question, you can always reach out to the Arts Alliance. The number is everywhere on the application process, so I'm not going to leave it here again. But go ahead and reach out to us, and someone will get back to you to answer your question. So good luck, and we look forward to seeing your grants soon.